The price of coffee is at a 50-year high. Have you noticed? Take a look at this. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, coffee prices have risen 23% since the start of the year. And since 2020, the average price of a pound of coffee is up nearly 70%.
Among the tariffs that have recently taken effect are those imposed on Brazil and other coffee-producing countries, increasing prices by more than a cupful. Consumer reporter John Matarese is sipping on that tonight in his Don't Waste Your Money report.
Tonight, new concerns about the cost of your caffeine fix. Coffee prices are surging as new tariffs take hold and consumers turn more cautious. I recently sat down with the founder of a growing roastery as coffee chains across the U.S. confront the true price of your daily brew.
The global coffee world just changed overnight, and America did not see it coming. Ethiopia and Brazil, two of the biggest coffee powers on the planet, have suddenly teamed up in a way that is shaking the entire U.S. market. For years, America controlled the coffee trade, but not anymore. New deals, new prices, and new supply chains are now leaving U.S. companies struggling to keep up, and billions of dollars are on the line. And when the news reached Trump, he was furious. Because this is not just about coffee, this is about power, influence, and who controls one of the world's most valuable crops. So how did Ethiopia and Brazil pull off this major win? And why is the U.S. losing so fast? Stay with me, because the real story behind this coffee shift will shock you. The world of coffee changed silently at first, like a small ripple moving across a huge ocean. Most people didn't notice it happening. They were busy drinking their morning cup, rushing to work, scrolling through their phones, living their everyday lives. But behind the scenes, something massive was forming. Something powerful. Something that would soon shake the American coffee industry in a way nobody expected. It began in a quiet office in Addis Ababa where a small group of Ethiopian coffee leaders sat around a long wooden table. They weren't dressed in fancy suits. They weren't holding expensive gadgets. They were farmers, representatives, exporters, and trade thinkers, people who understood the coffee soil with their hands and the coffee market with their minds. For years, they had watched other countries dominate the global market, even though Ethiopia was the birthplace of coffee itself. They knew the potential of their beans. They knew the world loved the taste of Ethiopian Arabica. But they also knew one truth. Love alone does not win a global market. They needed strategy. They needed power. They needed a partner. On the other side of the world, in São Paulo, Brazil's coffee industry faced a different challenge. For decades, Brazil had been the king of coffee, massive farms, giant exports, stable supply. But new competitors were rising, climate issues were hitting hard, and big buyers were pushing prices down. Brazil wanted more control. They wanted a bigger voice. They wanted someone who could bring unique flavor strength to match their production strength. That was when the first message was sent, and when the first quiet meeting happened, and when the first handshake between Ethiopia and Brazil began, something nobody in America saw coming. The idea was simple in words but huge in impact. Combine Ethiopia's unmatched quality with Brazil's massive supply. Two giants standing side by side, one with flavor, one with volume, one with history, one with power. Together, they could move the global coffee market like a storm. Their partnership began with small steps: new trade routes, new price agreements, shared technology, shared processing methods. But beneath the surface, both countries had one shared dream: to make their coffee so powerful, so essential, so dominant that major American companies would have no choice but to follow their lead. At first, the American market ignored the changes. They believed their long-term contracts and their global influence would protect them. They believed supply was stable, prices were stable. The system was safe, but the system was not safe because it had been built on the assumption that Ethiopia and Brazil would always work separately. The moment they joined forces, the balance shifted. Coffee buyers began noticing it when their usual suppliers raised prices. Not a small increase, a sharp one. Beans that once cost a comfortable amount suddenly doubled. America assumed it was temporary. They thought drought, inflation, or seasonal shortages were the cause. They didn't realize Ethiopian and Brazilian leaders were adjusting prices together, testing how the market reacted. The market reacted loudly. Coffee companies scrambled to control costs. Small roasters panicked. Big corporations sent urgent emails. Analysts wrote long reports that said nothing clearly but warned of possible market disruptions. Meanwhile, in cafes across America, customers began to complain that their favorite drinks were suddenly more expensive. But the real trouble came when Ethiopia and Brazil announced a new trade decision, a fictional but powerful twist in the story. They revealed a long-term coffee alliance agreement that changed global supply rules. For the first time in history, they would coordinate output, manage stock levels together, and control how much premium coffee entered the global market. It wasn't just business, it was strategy, and it worked. American buyers were caught off guard. They had no backup plan because no other countries could match Ethiopia's flavor or Brazil's scale at the same time. Vietnam had strong production but not the same taste. Colombia had great beans but not the volume. No combination could challenge this new partnership. Coffee shortages began appearing in some states. Nothing too dramatic at first, just small delays, a few empty shelves, a few price jumps. But then something bigger happened. Some of the largest American coffee chains received a notice that their contracts would be renegotiated under the new alliance rules. Prices would rise significantly, delivery schedules would change, and quality. Beans would go only to buyers who met new standards. America tried to negotiate, but Ethiopia and Brazil were no longer the suppliers begging for markets, they were leaders controlling the flow. And when you control the flow, you control everything. News reports began calling it the coffee shift. Analysts warned that billions of dollars were moving away from the U.S. market. Investors started pulling money from coffee-related stocks. Trade watchers said this was only the beginning. Coffee was no longer just a drink, it was a geopolitical weapon. Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, farmers celebrated quietly. For decades, they had worked tirelessly for low pay, sending some of the world's best coffee abroad while living modest lives. But the new alliance brought real change. Prices at the farm gate began rising. Young people once uninterested in farming now saw opportunity in it. Coffee villages boomed with new processing centers, better equipment, and new training programs. Families who once struggled finally earned fair wages. And for the first time in many years, farmers felt respected on the global stage. In Brazil, huge plantations upgraded their irrigation systems. Export companies expanded their shipping routes. A wave of investment poured into rural coffee towns, creating jobs, boosting incomes, and modernizing entire communities. Brazilian experts worked closely with Ethiopian cooperatives, sharing innovations in harvesting, drying, and logistics. They learned from each other. They grew stronger together. What made the alliance even more powerful was a secret project they launched, a new global coffee trading platform. This fictional system allowed them to bypass old trading hubs and sell directly to buyers in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. The platform offered better prices, faster transactions, and more transparency than traditional American-led systems. Suddenly, buyers from Saudi Arabia, China, South Korea, and Germany started signing contracts directly with Ethiopia and Brazil, cutting out U.S. intermediaries completely. This was when America finally realized the situation was far more serious than anyone had imagined. The American coffee market started losing billions in ground, trading, processing fees, transportation control, and influence. Factories that once roasted imported beans for re-export struggled to stay profitable. Companies that built their business around cheap coffee now faced record costs, and small, especially independent ones, fought to survive as their wholesale prices climbed higher and higher. But the biggest shock came when Ethiopia and Brazil introduced a new fictional product, a blended premium line called Alliance Roast. It combined Ethiopian floral highland beans with Brazilian deep body beans, creating a flavor profile that swept through Asia and Europe like wildfire. Influencers praised it, luxury cafes promoted it, online stores sold out in minutes. Even American consumers began searching for it, only to discover it was rare and expensive in the U.S. Every cup sold outside America was a reminder that the coffee world had changed and the U.S. was no longer the center of it. As this new reality settled in, something surprising began happening inside the United States. Some small coffee businesses saw opportunity instead of defeat. They reached out directly to Ethiopian cooperatives and Brazilian independent farmers. They formed new relationships. They paid fair prices. They cut out old corporate middlemen who charged too much. And slowly, new American specialty coffee shops began offering better quality drinks at honest prices. These smaller players thrived because they adapted. They respected the new coffee order instead of fighting it. They treated producers as partners instead of cheap suppliers. They listened instead of assuming. And in return, Ethiopia and Brazil welcomed them, giving them access to unique beans that big U.S. corporations had lost. But the biggest change was cultural. Americans began learning where their coffee really came from. They learned how long it took to grow. They learned the hard work behind every bean. They learned why quality costs money. More customers started choosing ethically sourced, premium products. More shops highlighted the origin of their beans. More roasters invested in fair trade. And slowly, the American coffee culture became deeper, richer, more honest. Back in Ethiopia, elders in coffee villages watched the global shift unfold with amazement. They never imagined their traditional drink shared under the shade of acacia trees would one day influence the world's biggest economy. In Brazil, farmers who once feared losing market share now walked their fields with confidence, knowing their partnership had rewritten global coffee rules. But the alliance didn't stop at coffee. They explored new ideas, shared research centers, eco-friendly farming projects, digital trading systems, even plans for a joint global Coffee Day celebration. Their success encouraged other countries in Africa and Latin America to consider new alliances of their own. The world's farmers saw that unity brought power, and power brought respect. The American coffee market eventually adjusted, but it never fully returned to its old dominance. It became one player among many, no longer the main driver of prices or policies. And in the long run, this shift forced the U.S. to innovate, improve quality, and build more equal relationships with global producers. The fictional story ends not with defeat for America, but with transformation. A world where Ethiopia and Brazil stand tall. A world where farmers earn fairly. A world where consumers understand the journey of their coffee. A world shaped not by one nation controlling everything, but by cooperation, partnership, and shared strength. And in that world, every cup of coffee, whether from a street in Addis Ababa, a beach shop in Rio, or a busy corner store in New York, tells the same story. A story of change, a story of unity, a story of how two nations reshaped the market, rebuilt their power, and reminded the world that great things grow from the soil, not from the boardroom. And with every sip, the world continues to feel the impact of the Ethiopian-Brazilian coffee revolution. A quiet but powerful movement that changed the global market forever. As we come to the end of this story, the truth becomes clear. The global coffee world will never be the same again. What began as a quiet partnership between Ethiopia and Brazil turned into a powerful shift that touched every corner of the market. It started with beans grown by farmers in peaceful fields, but it grew into a movement that shook boardrooms, markets, and entire nations. And now the impact of that movement continues to spread. The world is watching a new era unfold. An era where countries that were once seen only as suppliers now stand as decision makers. An era where farmers who were once underpaid now have a voice. An era where coffee is not controlled by one main market but shaped by nations that understand the soil, the climate, and the culture behind every bean they produce. For many years, the story of coffee was told by others. It was measured in profits, controlled by middlemen, influenced by corporations that rarely looked toward the farms. But Ethiopia and Brazil rewrote that story. They reminded the world that coffee is not just business. It is heritage, identity, and survival for the millions of people who grow it. They showed that when producers unite, they become stronger than anyone expected. And while America faced a difficult moment, even that changed the global conversation in a healthy way. It forced buyers, companies, and traders to rethink their role in the industry. It pushed them to build fairer partnerships. It made them value quality over cheap supply. And in the end, even American consumers gained a deeper understanding of where their favorite drink truly comes from. This fictional shift revealed something powerful. The world is connected by more than trade routes. It is connected by the choices we make, the products we buy, and the respect we show to the people who create the things we enjoy every day. A simple cup of coffee carries a story of farmers, of climate, of tradition, of long journeys across oceans, and now of global alliances that reshape entire markets. Ethiopia and Brazil became symbols of what can happen when nations believe in their resources and stand together. Their partnership inspired others, proving that strength does not always come from size alone, but from unity, vision, and courage. They showed that you don't need to follow the old system if you can build a better one. And that message continues to echo around the world. As the fictional market adjusts to this new reality, one thing remains certain. Coffee will always find a way to bring people together, whether it's enjoyed in a bustling city, a small village home, or a quiet office far from the farms. Every sip connects the drinker to the heartbeat of the people who grew it. And now, with Ethiopia and Brazil leading the charge, that heartbeat is stronger than ever. The story of their alliance is not just about economic power. It is about pride. It is about culture. It is about reclaiming a place that was always deserved but rarely recognized. It is about proving that nations built on rich soil and honest work can stand tall on the world stage. As we close this chapter, imagine a world where every farmer is respected, every country has a fair chance, and every market values people as much as profit. That world is possible. And in this story, it began with two nations deciding they would no longer play by old rules. The coffee revolution they started is more than a shift in trade. It is a symbol of global change. A reminder that power can move, influence can shift, and the unexpected can happen when people choose unity over competition. So the next time you pick up a cup of coffee, think about the journey behind it. Think about the hands that grew it, the mountains that shaped it, the long hours of farming, picking, washing, drying, roasting, and transporting. Think about the new alliances that gave producers the strength to stand equal, and think about how the world continues to change, one decision at a time. This story may be fictional, but the message is real. The future belongs to those who dare to create it. And in this tale, Ethiopia and Brazil created a future that surprised the world, challenged the system, and proved that even the most familiar market can be transformed when courage meets opportunity. Thank you for being part of this journey, and remember, every great story begins with a single seed planted in the right soil at the right moment, just like coffee.